Hey everyone, welcome to my presentation today, Leading Tech Teams in Uncertain Times. So today I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, both of our industry as a whole, but also of last year. So as you might figure, this is probably not one of those feel-good presentations, right? Because, you know, our industry and last year and so on and so forth. But what I hope that you will leave this room with is a sense of how you as a leader, both formal and informal, can help your teams navigate this uncertainty that we find ourselves in. I'm going to give you 5 concrete steps or 5 concrete skills that you can take with you and implement in your teams as you go back to your workplace tomorrow. So let's kick this off, and I want to kick this off with talking a little bit about the dot-com bubble. So who here is old enough in the industry to have actually worked during the dot-com bubble? Great, now you can correct me if I make any mistakes in the presentation. So this whole thing, it kind of started in the late 90s. It was like the gold rush, right? But we had less pickaxes, more caffeine, and more keyboards going around. Everybody was building the next big, great thing. And the ones that weren't building, they were throwing money around. We call them investors. And they were basically pushing money into anything they could figure out. So we did get a lot of brilliant ideas, like pets.com, where you could order pet food online, or boo.com, which was one of the world's first online fashion retailers. The big problem was that a lot of those ideas were way too early. We also got a lot of really bad ideas during the dot-com bubble. Most companies had more money than they knew how to spend. So things like huge parties, company helicopters, jet skis, you know, renting a whole beach, kind of became the standard. It was the good times. Nobody really cared too much about making profits because profits weren't what most companies measured. Most companies measured eyeballs. How many people do we have on our site? And this was all great because the stocks just kept rising and rising, you know, to the moon. So who would have thought it would eventually all come crashing down? And then in around 2000, some investors show up and they go like, hey, where's our money? And of course, there was no money, so that became a little bit of a problem. It all just burst like an overinflated balloon. So my name is Martin Mazur. I'm a consultant, coach, and a speaker. I help companies bridge the gap between business and tech so that they can focus on delivering great products to their clients. I have over 20 years of experience in the industry, all of them which I've spent as a consultant. Meaning I've seen big organizations, small organizations, well-functioning organizations, and maybe the organizations that don't really do too well. I do speak Polish, but it's more a beer Polish. So if you take me out for a beer later on, you know, we can do it in Polish. It's not a business Polish, so that's why the presentation is in English. And I was not part of the dot-com bubble. No, I started my career in 2003. Meaning I was part of what I like to call the cleanup crew. So by the time I entered the industry, it had went the other way. We didn't just do things, you know, any way we wanted to. We had to work with roadmaps. We had Gantt charts. We had budgets. We had very detailed specs. And when I say detailed specs, is one of my first jobs. I literally got a binder of inputs and outputs to C++ functions that I was supposed to implement. That's the way, you know, that's how detailed the specs were. And at the time, a lot of that stuff actually worked. And the reason a lot of that stuff worked back in the day was because the world was simply moving slower. One of my first jobs, I released software on Ds. I hope everybody knows what this is. Yes? I don't know. I go to conferences with a lot of young people. So we release software on CD-ROMs, and not the CD-ROMs that you create in your own recorder at home, like the CD-ROMs that go to a factory to get pressed. And after they get pressed, they get packaged in a jewel case, put in a box together with a manual and shrink wrapped together. And that's the way you ship software. So once the software gets to the factory, the code gets to the compiled code gets to the factory, it needs to be pristine. You can't have bugs in that software because nobody on your team wants to be responsible for a zero-day hotfix. Meaning that, you know, as the client opens their pristine software, there's a little note saying, oh, by the way, after you've installed it, please go onto this web page and download a hotfix because we shipped some buggy code. So, you know, we did all of the specs and Gantt charts and, you know, code freezes and shipped things off to testing, and everything was nice and pristine, and you know, it went on in production. We shipped once a year, sometimes twice a year. We had a new version. So everything was kind of going on a slow cadence. But since then, our context has expanded. Like, no client would be happy with us saying, like, we're going to give you one release a year because it needs to be perfect. No, we have the web. We release several times a day. We push things out in production all the time. I wake up in the morning, the apps on my phone have updated, and I don't even know about it. There's new features in there. So we can't really count on just putting out one piece of software every year or so. We need to do this continuously. And not only continuously, but we need to do this in response to the way the world changes. So something happens in the world which will affect how our clients perceive a piece of software, and we need to fix that immediately. Not in a month, like immediately, this week. So to illustrate why this is so hard, let's just take a look at 2023. I'm just going to talk you through the last year. This fantastic year. We started in January with a lot of economic uncertainty. We went into what many define as a recession. Then in February, we see, you know, the craziness at Twitter. Elon Musk keeps going completely bonkers and destroying a huge company because, hey, why not? And then, also in February, we see the war in Ukraine keeps dragging on. I know that had a lot of impact here. More than so than in Sweden, where I live. And then in February, the Turkey-Syria earthquake hits, which, you know, another huge disaster. Then we see March, AI enters the chat as OpenAI releases both API access and plugins to ChatGPT, which is great, but undoubtedly creates a lot of work for a lot of people, because now all of a sudden you can integrate that stuff into your everyday applications, right? And then something happened nobody thought would happen. One of the biggest banks for startups, Silicon Valley Bank, goes belly up. And a lot of companies had to get bailed out. And then kind of April hits. And April is my favorite month of 2023 because nothing big really happens in April. It's just quiet. It's a nice month. May rolls around, and First Republic Bank in the US also goes belly up, and that's actually a bigger impact than Silicon Valley Bank, but it wasn't as newsworthy, so a lot of people missed that one. And then we have the whole summer with, you know, both Greece, Hawaii, and Canada having wildfires, but still global warming is a hoax. And to top that off, in August, world oceans reach an all-time high temperature. So yeah, we have some big issues. September, there's an earthquake in Morocco, very devastating. And because the European Central Bank goes, you're all having way too good of a time, they put interest rates at an all-time high in September, just to top it off, because 2023 wasn't bad enough. And then, of course, Hamas decides to attack Israel, sending the whole Gaza region into a huge conflict with casualties on both sides, which is still dragging on, and is a total disaster. Iceland is hit by an earthquake in November, which results in a volcano erupting in December. And then finally, you know, something cool happens as ChatGPT updates to include up until April 2023 in December. So now you can actually ask ChatGPT about the bad stuff that happened in the beginning of last year. So as we move into 2024, the only feeling we can have is everything's going to be all right, right? It's fine, it's going to be okay. So the reason I'm showing you this is not to bum you out in the beginning of my presentation. It's basically just to ask you a simple question. Did you put any of those things on your roadmap for 2023? Did you be like, oh, this is going to happen, so we need to have this in our roadmap so we can plan for it? And, do stuff. No, you didn't, right? But some of those things undoubtedly affected your company, your clients, or the code you were working on, or even maybe the team personally. But you didn't account for any of it. So at this point, my clients usually go and say like, great, we're so happy to have you here because now you can tell us what 2024 is going to be like so we can plan for 2024. I'm not that good. I wish I was that good, but I'm not that good. And neither are these guys. They're not that good either. But they publish reports, and everybody reads the reports. I'm not going to read the reports. I just take the reports and I put them into AI, and I go like, hey, AI, what are the major trends going to be for 2024? It's fairly accurate, and don't try to read any of this. It doesn't matter anyway. And I could have done one of these for tech trends as well, but it just probably would have been like 5 points of LLMs, 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 LLMs. So the point is, none of that is on your roadmap either. So, and even if it was, the only thing I would be able to guarantee you is that with all certainty, you would be wrong anyway. So we've moved into this new era where we need to think differently about the teams we build. We need to think differently about the companies we build. So instead of optimizing for planning, instead of optimizing for trying to figure out what the next step will be so we can plan for it, we need to build teams that are geared towards preparedness, which means that they're prepared to tackle anything that the world or the context is willing to throw at them. So when we optimize for preparedness, we don't think about it as moving from destination X to destination Y and then kind of compensating for deviations. We go and say we don't know what the next destination will be, so we need a team that is built in a way so whatever the destination is, they're going to be able to get there. Now, what you might be getting from this, and we're going to get into this more details, is these teams are more versatile. They're not specialists in that sense. There might be specialists on the team, but the teams have to be a more general approach teams. So we can't build teams that are geared towards being what I usually call a feature factory, meaning this is a team which at one end consumes coffee and Jira tickets, and at the other end spits out software. Because that's not how the future is going to be built. We need to build teams that input in one end actual business or customer problems, and at the other end output solutions. And if those solutions don't work, they feel accountable for fixing those things. And that's a different type of game. So psychologically, what actually does happen when we are faced with uncertainty? When we're faced with something that we don't know, what do we as people do, or what do we as organizations and teams do? Do we rise up to the challenge like Superman and go like, yes, I'm going to fix this problem, here I am, it's uncertain? Some people do, but it's rare. Most people say, let's sit down and formulate a plan. And again with the planning. And once you're done with the plan, once you've formulated the plan, the world has moved on. The context has changed. So whatever plan you just formulated, by the time you deliver on it, is going to be wrong anyway. So what should you do? If this doesn't work, what's the solution? Well, let me take you back again to that job I was talking about where we shipped code on CD, where we shipped software on CD-ROMs. Now, at the time I was working as a software developer, and everything worked. That's what I said in the intro, right? Well, everything worked until it didn't. Because even in the greatest of teams, with the greatest of plans, things fail. So we were very close to a release, to sending the code off to the factory, when there was a critical bug discovered that nobody could solve. And this would potentially create a lot of issues, because if you've ever shipped software like this, you know that it's not simply calling somebody up and saying, we're going to need another 1 or 2 weeks. No, because the software needs to go in the box needs to get shipped out to the client, there's trade shows booked, there's things that are going to happen, there's big releases, there's CEOs going on stage. You don't simply push a release a few weeks because you discovered a bug. You have to fix it. So what did we do? Or rather, not us. I had a really great project manager at the time. What does our great project manager do? She goes out and she handpicks a few people from the whole company. And she sits us down in a conference room and she goes, listen, what do you need to get this fixed? And we had one response. Well, first of all, we need pizza. Like everybody needs pizza to fix hard software problems. But that's not the only thing. Of course, we said we need 24-hour supply of pizza. We need access to the building so we can work in the evenings and weekends. We need all of our computers to be brought into one room so we can sit together. We need a bunch of whiteboards. And we worked. We worked our asses off. I went home to sleep 6 hours. I went back to the office. And eventually, we did get that fixed. So this situation had not only uncertainty, it had 4 elements. It had volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. So what was it that our project manager did that was so great to address all of these? Well, volatility, that's when things change very quickly. You have a lot of rapidly changing parameters. And this point in time, there was a lot of things that were changing really quickly. But what she did was she set a direction. She said, this is the one problem I need to get fixed. And then she had us volunteer to do it. Remember, we weren't told you have to fix it. It was more, are you up to the task of fixing it? So we volunteered to fix the problem. Next one here is uncertainty. You don't know what to do, and we didn't know what to do. It was a quite complex memory leak and different places in the system, and we couldn't really pin down what was going on. So she provided us with enough context to be able to discover the solution on our own. She said, this is the thing that needs to happen, and this is the consequence if that thing didn't happen. You remember I told you if it wasn't done, we couldn't make the release, we couldn't make the trade show, the CEOs couldn't go on stage, it would cost a lot of money, it would be a lot of embarrassment. She gave us the full story that we needed to understand how to navigate the situation. And then there's complexity. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of parameters. This was a very complex system, not a thing you install on one server. There's a bunch of servers, and there's small servers hidden in the walls, and there's, it was, huge code base with a bunch of different components. But she also told us that you're going to discover a bunch of weird things along the way, but you can't care about those things. You need to care about this specific problem. So she created a smaller context for us in which we could work. And then there was ambiguity. There was no clear right or wrong. There's no up and down. And we didn't really know in what part of the software we had to look. We didn't know if it was a third-party library, if it was the code we've written, if it was the machine code, the C++ code, the .NET code. There was so many different technologies involved in this. But she handpicked a team of people from all different disciplines. Even if this was a memory leak, she put designers on the team. She put QA on the team, front ends, back ends, everyone. So we had at least one person from, each background, each skill set, and it was a very mixed team. So this model, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity model, it's called the VUCA model. And this is something which the US military created after Cold War to describe the state of world affairs. Because up until the Cold War, it was very clear, who were the good guys and who was bad guys. These are, this is this and these are the enemy. But after the Cold War, that became uncertain. There was multiple frontiers and nobody really knew who the allies were and who the enemies were. So, this model was created by the military to kind of explain how the world looks, and I think it's still relevant. And it's relevant not only in a military context, but it's also very relevant in the context of how we run our organizations and our teams. Because if there's any world that changes quickly, it's the world of tech, right? We see the most rapid acceleration of change of any industry. So what do we need to do to lead in 2024 and beyond? So I'm going to use the VUCA framework kind of as a scaffold for this talk, taking you through each and every aspect of this and giving you one skill. There's probably more skills, but I'm just going to go through one, attached to a few stories, so you can remember them better. And the first one we're going to talk about is uncertainty, because this talk is called Leading in Uncertain Times. So the number one thing you can do to lead in uncertainty is lead with context. So what does lead with context actually mean? Well, most of you probably know of Gandhi. So in the 1930s, there was a salt monopoly in India created by the British, saying that nobody else except for the British was allowed to distill salt, evaporate seawater to make salt. Now Gandhi thought that this was like one of the most unfair things, for all the unfair things that Indians were going through at the time. So he decided to launch a civil disobedience campaign. He called it, or it later became known as the Salt March, where he gathered a few dozen of his followers and went from village to village all the way up until the sea, talking about this. And through every stop that he made, he gathered more and more followers. And as he reached the sea, he did the one thing which he wasn't allowed to do. He took seawater and he evaporated it into salt. Of course, he got arrested, but that single act created a following of over 60,000 people throughout India and a ripple effect of civil disobedience in the whole country, which eventually made the British take action on this or change this thing. And Gandhi was later released from prison. So the thing that Gandhi did was basically he created a vision. He says, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to do. He went first. He went on the walk himself. And then he had other people volunteer to join him. So he created a voluntary movement of people. This is exactly what leading with context is. So when we talk about organizations that are built around leading with context, it usually starts from the top. It starts with the company mission. So why is this company put on this earth? Like, what are we trying to achieve? Why do we get out of bed in the morning and do the work that we do? Then we have the product vision and principles. And the product vision and principles is basically, what's the vision of this product? Where do we want to go with this product in 5 to 10 years? How is this going to make our users' life different? And the principles are rule sets, how we prioritize things. If we stand between profits and ethics, which one would we pick? If we have technological choices that we need to adhere to, which are these technological choices? So on and so forth. And the reason we put in these principles is because we want to make sure that the decisions can be pushed down to the team, so the teams can make the decisions. And then, of course, we have the product strategy, which is the whole idea of, how is this product going to develop over the years, or over the year, or so on and so forth. A good product strategy, or some call it a North Star, Daniel Ek from Spotify, he went out one year and he said, like, our strategy is to kill radio. Because the biggest problem Spotify was facing at the time was actually that, you know, they were not winning over radio. People were still tuning into radio in their cars. And that sparked a lot of different things in the different teams. You know, some teams started working on onboarding podcasts. Some teams started working on doing a better shuffle. Some teams did, you know, your daily drive things and stuff like that. And then, of course, we have the teams. And the teams here, they can't be delegated tasks. They need to be delegated problems. So we need to start working with real business problems with the teams. For instance, say we're have a shopping cart team. You know, that team might have a problem, which is you need to have better increased conversion, right? We're not telling you how to do it, but we want less dropped shopping carts. That's your mission. And teams here, we're going to get into this. There have to be cross-functional and diverse teams. All right. I forgot I had a microphone. The next thing we're going to talk about is volatility. And the best way to deal with volatility is not to have the sense of discovery on a cadence. It's not to react to the changes happening in the world on a set cadence, saying like we're doing discovery work once every 3 or 4, 5 months. It's more to have discovery on as an integrated part inside of the way you work with the team. So when I do this talk in Sweden, everybody knows who this is. Does everybody know who this is? No, some people know. It's Benny Andersson. He's one of the head people behind the music group ABBA. And he produces a shit ton of music. Like, he does a lot of music. Not only does he write music for other artists, he writes music for himself, he does musicals, he's still active. And in an interview with him, he says that he roughly releases 20 hours of music every year. 20 hours. And the way he releases 20 hours of music every year is that he goes into the studio 8 hours a day and experiments, plays things. Most of the things he plays, most of the things he does, just simply never reach the public. That's his discovery process. Now, most tech teams I meet don't even do a fraction of that discovery. Now, of course, I'm not telling you to go and experiment for 80% of your time and then spend a little bit on delivering. But you need to have more discovery work, and you need to have it continuously inside of the team. So it's cool because this picture, I've stolen it from Henrik Nyberg, who wrote Scrum from the Trenches, and I've seen it in 2 other presentations at the conference. But I'm using it in a different way than Henrik intended it to, and I'm using it in a different way than it was intended in the other presentations. Because the way it's described is basically, don't do this when you do Agile, do that. What I'm telling you is you have to do both. Because if you look at the top image here, the biggest problem with this is the little person, yellow person with the skateboard, that's not a happy customer. Kick bike one, not a happy customer. The bike one, It's not until we get to the motorcycle we have a okay, happy customer, and what the customer actually wanted was the car. Now, please tell me that, if you are trying to commute to work and you describe your requirements and you say, I need the car, and somebody says, well, here I have a skateboard, and try that out for a few weeks and let me know what you think. Are you going to be happy with that solution? No, you're going to leave and you're going to go to a competitor. And this is the problem a lot of organizations do, because they think that you're supposed to do the discovery process in your live product. The problem with doing the discovery process in your live product is it's way too slow, because we need to actually build it and get it out to the client. While if we do the discovery process inside of our team, we can do it much quicker. We can do prototypes, mock-ups, paper prototypes that we can test with our customers very early on inside of a lab setting to figure out that it's actually the car that they want. And then when we know it's the car that they want, we can start actually building the car. And we can build the car the ways cars are supposed to be built, with the architecture that the car is supposed to have. Because please tell me how you take a skateboard and you rebuild it to a car. You basically don't. And this is the problem a lot of tech teams are struggling with. Because when we're discovering things live, we're constantly trying to rebuild the product as it's in production. So the way this works is if we have a cross-functional team, we can run both discovery and delivery in parallel. And the things we discovered, the things we learn through data and experimentation, we feed that back into the delivery. Which then can be planned for to be delivered in a normal manner. All right, moving on, let's talk about complexity. So complexity means we have a lot of moving parameters. We don't really know how things change or when they change. And the best thing you can do when you're faced with a situation like that is work with constraints. So put constraints on yourself, on the product, on the team in a way that's going to help you build what you're trying to do. And the best story I have of this is actually a Mick Jagger story. So everybody knows about Rolling Stones, everybody knows about Mick Jagger, and everybody now, thanks to TikTok and the internet, knows about the song Moves Like Jagger. And they, of course, know the dance style of Mick Jagger, either because they know about him or because they know about the meme. And the reason Mick Jagger has this very unique dance style is not because he invented it freely. It's because of necessity, it's because of constraints. Because when the Rolling Stones were playing small clubs all around the world, after they set up all their equipment, after they set up all their stuff, there was roughly 1 square meter for Mick Jagger to stand on the stage. So basically he had 1 square meter and a microphone. And Mick Jagger, being the showman that he is, decided that, you know what, I'm going to try to put on a hell of a show, even though I only have this 1 square meter. So he developed a dance style which he basically could do in that little limited space. And that's what actually got him the popularity. Now, constraints can either be out of necessity, like, in the Rolling Stones. They simply couldn't, there was no other situation. Or we can force constraints upon our teams in order to spark creativity. Now, there is no such thing as an architect that has unlimited land or unlimited budget or unlimited anything. There's always limitations, always constraints. So if we work with those constraints to find new ways of thinking, new solutions, that's where we can find opportunity. So 2 more examples of this. One is Zappos that started selling shoes online. Before Zappos started selling shoes, there's very few companies doing it. And the ones that were doing it were failing, and were failing miserably. So what Zappos did was they looked into it and was like, why is this not working out? And they figured out 2 things. People were afraid that they would get the wrong product and then not get the support that they needed if they got the wrong product. This is why people decided not to buy shoes online. So Zappos solved that by saying, well, we're going to have free shipping and free returns, because that way, if you don't like the product, you return it at no cost to you. And number 2, we're going to have kick-ass customer service, meaning if you call us up or if you email us, we're going to be the world's best customer service. Now, those 2 things worked really well and made Zappos launch as one of the best e-fashion, shoe e-fashion retailers. And then those things were copied into other industries or into other fashion retailers. Because who would have figured out that, free returns would have been a thing that would actually create the success. The other example here is not from the software industry, but it's from aviation. Southeast Airlines and the US. So when Southeast Airlines had really bad times and huge budget cuts, what they needed to do was sell one of their airplanes. Now, in the aviation industry, selling an airplane is not a problem. What's a problem is if you actually lose your slot times at the airports. So Southeast Airlines was really committed to keeping all of their slot times at the airport, given one less airplane. So they started thinking, they did a discovery session on this and started thinking, and somebody came up with the idea that, yes, we can keep all of our routes and time slots if we can do 10-minute turnaround times. It's like, get out of here. Like, that was unheard of in the aviation industry to do 10-minute turnaround times. But Southeast Airlines figured out how to do 10-minute turnaround times, and then that became the industry standard for low-fare airlines all over the world later on. So thanks to that, I could fly here and back home for less than 500 zloty because somebody figured out 10-minute turnaround times. All right. We have two more things to go through. The last one here is ambiguity. And this is where everybody is a little bit sleepy, so I'm going to do some audience participation because it's fun for me. On the next slide, there's going to be an image. And I want you all to look at the image and remember what it is you see first. All right? Go. All right, hands up. Who saw the rabbit first? Who saw the duck? Can everybody see both of them now? Yeah, anybody still not seeing both? All right, somebody help her out. It's gonna be fine, I can help you later. All right, let's do it once more. Let's do it once more. This time I just want you to shout out what it is you see on the picture. All right? Just shout what you see on the picture. Ready? Wow. Computer. This is interesting. I've done this presentation so many times, always somebody in the audience shouts bomb. This is what happens when you talk to people in the engineering mindset. It's a computer, it's a beta version of Raspberry Pi. Great. So you're all much better people than the people in Sweden. Congratulations, you win. It actually is. It's an alarm clock. It's an alarm clock. It's an alarm clock that was done by a kid who was 15 years old called Ahmed Muhammad. He in 2015, and he did this because he was very much into engineering. He soldered it. He built it himself, and then he took it to school. Now, there's a problem with taking an alarm clock that looks like this to school if your name is Ahmed Muhammad. He was very proud of his alarm clock, and he showed it to his engineering teacher. And his engineering teacher, just like all of you, immediately understood what it was and goes like, wow, that's really nice, great work, but put it in your bag and don't show it to anybody else. Now, Ahmed was still very proud of the thing he did. So in English class, he took it out and he showed it to his friends. Upon his English teacher saw this and decided that she would call the police. He was taken away from school and suspended for 3 days because of this, right? Which is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Now, the point I'm trying to prove here is we need to build our teams in a way where we have culture add, not culture fit. We need to get as many people with diverse backgrounds on our teams in order to be able to navigate ambiguity, in order to be able to see both the duck and the rabbit. We need people of different gender, we need people with different education, we need people with different cultural backgrounds, socioeconomical backgrounds, because this way, when we're faced with ambiguity, when we don't know what it is we're looking at, we can have many different perspectives on the same thing. So if all of this room would be one team, everybody would just be like, it's a computer. And we would all agree on that, and nobody would, have a different perspective. There wouldn't be a good discussion around those things. So this is why you're valuable, because you can only see one thing. You couldn't see both of them. You're awesome. And just to, drive this home, I'm going to tell you a story about this woman. Her name is Esther Blenda Nordström, and she was a Swedish journalist in the early 1900s. And at that time, female journalists were really, really rare, like unicorn rare. But she decided she wanted to do this. And in 1914, she embarked on a crazy journey to uncover how bad the working situations for maids and domestic workers in Sweden were. And the way she did it is she went undercover as a maid inside of Swedish households in order to document the harsh conditions from the inside, the different mistreatments. And this resulted in a book called A Maid Among Maids. So she actually pioneered a technique of journalists going undercover that was never done before, and then in the 1970s was attributed to a German man, as a lot of the cool things women do are. Nordström's reporting also uncovered, covered different topics in education, healthcare, social issues in Sweden, and she contributed a lot to the growing awareness of women's rights and social injustices. Now, the reason this is interesting is that Esther was the only person that could have done this. Precisely because she was a woman journalist. Precisely because of that reason, she was the only person that could have done this at the time. And that's what's interesting, that the background we have, who we are, sometimes uniquely equips us to doing something which nobody else at the time can do. Which brings me to the last thing I hope to share with you today before we go on a coffee break. And that's that navigating this VUCA world, you're going to fail a lot. We fail a lot all the time. So honing the skill of being able to start again, to take a deep breath, saying that didn't work out, let's find another solution, let's try something else, is one of the most important skills you can have in this world. It's one of the most important things you can train your teams to have. Because it's natural for us to get beat down when we fail. But what we need to do is we need to take a deep breath and start again, start again, start again. And the queen of starting again, the person in the world who's the absolutely best at starting again, regardless of what you think of her music, is Taylor Swift. Now, Taylor Swift, this is a powerhouse. Like, she's a skilled musician and a businesswoman. Like, she's done it all. And she really does know how to bounce back. There's countless stories throughout her career where she's met hardships. One of the things I found interesting is early in her career when she was trying to launch, she was rejected so many times because of two things. One, it was her music style, because nobody wanted to listen to that music, they said. And two, it was her age, because she was only 14 years old. So what Taylor did was, listen, she convinced her parents to move to somewhere else where people would appreciate her music style more. I couldn't convince my parents to let me stay out one more hour when I was 14. This is how awesome she is. Now, after that, her career has had beatdown after beatdown, and she's bounced back every time. Just recently, I'm sure you read about this, she didn't manage to buy back all of her back catalog from a record label. So she was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to re-record all of my old songs because That's a creative solution. Which put her as the only artist next to Dolly Parton who had both the original version and the re-recorded version hit top charts. That's amazing. So what is it Taylor knows that the rest of us don't? I don't know. Like, someday maybe I'll be able to ask her, but the thing is, what I attribute this way of figuring out new solutions to old problems and being able to bounce back and find another solution to is the idea of creative thinking, the idea of creative problem solving. Now, this is a test for creativity in children, which was conducted by George Land and Beth Jarman in 1968. And they used the NASA test for creativity. This is the test that NASA uses to give their engineers to test how good they are at creative thinking. Now, how many percent of 5-year-olds do you think scored at genius levels in this test? See? Somebody knows about this research. 98% of 5-year-olds score at genius levels in the NASA's test for creativity. And just to give you context, the questions on this test are things like, if you're in the middle of the ocean and the only thing you have to survive is a paper clip, what do you do? Now, I have a 6-year-old at home. They go like, it's easy. The paper clip is huge and it's made of styrofoam. Right? You see beyond the problem. They retested the same children at 10 years, and by that time it was down to 30%. At 15 it was down to 12%, and then they took a bunch of 31-year-olds and they tested them, and it's whooping 2% score at genius levels. So something between we're 5 until we're 30 destroys us, destroys our creative thinking and problem solving. Now, I have my theory about this, and like I blame the school system globally. Because the school system is created to make great industrial workers. You're supposed to solve problems the way I tell you to solve the problem. And this is the only way, and you're supposed to do that for 50 minutes. Then you get a 10-minute break. And then you come back and you work hard for 50 minutes and get another 10-minute break. Now, this is exactly what factories needed back in the day. But this is not what we need to navigate uncertain times. We need a different level of creativity. We need a different way of thinking about problems and problem solving. So this is why I think best practices are so harmful to all the things we do, because when we get out of university and we start working, people go and think like, there has to be a best way of solving this. Maybe, maybe not. So, to summarize this talk, we deal with uncertainty by leading with context, by setting out a vision, a direction, going first, and then creating a voluntary movement of people to follow us. We deal with volatility by enabling discovery, by working both with discovery and delivery in parallel inside of our teams and creating those quick feedback loops. We deal with complexity by working with constraints, by either with natural constraints that already exist in a system or by imposed constraints that we can put into it. And then we deal with ambiguity by embracing difference. And most importantly, we need to hone the skill to start again, to bounce back as we fail. Now, if you did find, oh, and lastly, if there's nothing else you take with you on this presentation, is that then if there's anything that you want to take with you from this presentation, if all of this has been overwhelming to you, make sure to just play the current move. The worst thing you can do when you lead a team in uncertain times is do nothing. Is be completely paralyzed by, we have to look into this, or we have to research it, we have to figure it out, we have to do something. Inaction is the thing that kills most teams in uncertainty. So play the current move. What I mean by that is you've all played Tetris. So the bricks are falling regardless of if you want it or not, right? you can't do anything. The bricks are coming down. The only thing you can do is you can take the next brick coming down and you can place it somewhere. That might be the best move or it might not be the best move, but you're going to have to play from that position. So regardless of, all of this, the most important advice I can give you is to play the current move. Now, if you did find this presentation interesting, I've recently started a podcast together with Ebba Lauren, who's a doctor in management and is a specialist in the VUCA model. It's called Leading in Flux. We've just done one pilot episode, but the second one is on my computer, and I need to edit it. So if you want that episode out, you can go and hassle me on social media. Be like, hey, where's the episode? Come on, work harder. And I'll make sure to get it to you. Great. What are your questions?